Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for International Cat Day today. We're going to be making an adorable little cat trinket dish, and you can use this for little jewelry or for beads or just to be a cute little piece of decoration. We're going to be using air dry clay today. So I've got a little clump of my air dry clay already. I'm using Creatology air dry clay, but you can also use Crayola brand or any other brand you might have found at Michael's. And then besides clay, we're going to be using paint. So I have my acrylic paints here that are ready to go and some paint brushes. And then I have a little bit of water. So I have a little jar here of water for my paint brushes, as well as a little water can help us smooth out our clay. And I have a spare sheet of paper. That's just going to be to mix colors or to pour a little bit of paint out. And then lastly, I have a sheet of parchment paper. And this, you can also use a sheet of foil, anything that will keep your clay from sticking. You could just use it onto like a countertop surface. You're just going to want to make sure you kind of pull that up. It should wash off of any sort of like countertop or tile surface as well. But the parchment paper is really easy while it dries. And the thing about air dry clay is that it does take a little while to dry. So although we're going to go through all the steps with you today of how to get your finished little cat trinket dish, you're not going to be able to paint your trinket dish until it fully dries, which is great that this all goes live on YouTube tomorrow. So you can tune back in on YouTube to watch the painting again if you want to, and your clay trinket dish should be dry by then. So I'm going to go ahead and flip my camera around so you guys can see my hands, and then we'll get started. Okay, so see here, I've got my parchment paper. And I've got like a chunk of my clay here. And you can use kind of as much or as little as you want, depending on how big or small you want your trinket dish to be. I'm going to use a little bit less than what I pulled out here. And so you can kind of see here, I've got a little clump that fits in the palm of my hand. This is probably a little bit smaller than a golf ball. If you want to make yours a bigger trinket dish than what the example is, you could definitely use more clay and do all the same techniques, just make it bigger. Or if you want to make yours thicker, you can use more clay as well. It's just going to take longer to dry. So keep that in mind. The thicker it is, the longer it will take to dry. But the thinner it is, the more fragile it'll be. So you want to make sure we're going to find that happy medium spot where it's durable, but still doesn't take too long to dry. So we're going to start by taking our ball of clay, and I like to kind of roll it between both hands. This kind of gives you a nice smooth surface, also kind of warms up the clay a little bit, makes it more pliable. Sometimes the clay at first be really hard to manipulate, so if you kind of smush it back and forth between your hands. If you've ever made pizza or bread dough, anything like that, it's kind of similar. So just like to take our time, smush it back and forth, kind of using the harder part of your palm to kind of knead it. And again, this is just kind of making the dough a little bit warmer and pushing it all together so that you don't have any, sometimes when you first push it together, you can kind of see in this loose portion here, all these cracks, and that can cause a little bit of brittleness to it that makes it easier to crack. So this makes it all nice and tight. And as we get started here, as Nicole said, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to type that into our Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. Since it is International Cat Day, if you guys have any cat facts or want to tell us about your cat, if you have a pet cat, we'd love to hear. Okay, so after a minute or two of kind of just playing with the dough, again, kind of kneading it, rolling it together, we are going to start to actually shape our little cat head. So I'm going to press my little ball down flat. You can see here, we're about a little more than 1/4 inch thick. This is going to get thinner as we make it a little bit bigger and shape it into the cat head. but we don't want to make it too thin yet, because as we push it and pull it to make little ears and to make our cat shape, it'll get thinner and thinner. So we're going to start about there, and this kind of covers most of the palm of my hand. And then we're going to start pushing into our cat ear corners. You can see as I'm pushing, it's going to get thinner and thinner. I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to kind of pinch the two corners to start to make little cat ears. And then just like any clay or Play-Doh, you kind of smooth it out with your finger as you go. We're going to come back in and smooth out all these rougher edges with a little bit of water as well. You can start to see little points here. Again, I'm just kind of pinching the corners. And then I'm going to start to smooth out the base of the cat face. And I'm just using my fingertip here and kind of with the flat portion of my finger, just pressing lightly. If you press too hard, you can push really almost all the way through it and create a big dent. So I'm just pressing kind of lightly, slowly, and we'll start to spread out our clay. So once you have it about the size and roughly the shape, then we're going to start being able to smooth this out a little bit, and that will give us a little lip at the bottom. So we want to start smoothing from the top down. And so I'm just going to take my finger and right along the edges, I'm using a pretty light touch. And I'm going to start smoothing out all of my creases and lines. You can see already starting a difference. From this side here is looking nice and smooth compared to this ear that I haven't touched yet. To start smoothing it, you can see cracks and little cracks along the edges here. And you're going to take your finger, and then this is where a little bit of water comes in handy. So I'm just going to dip my finger right into my little cup of water. And you don't want a lot, just enough to get it kind of re-moistened, and then start smoothing that out. If you get a little too much, you can always take a little paper towel or a napkin. But the air dry clay will absorb the water, but it kind of creates a little bit of a paste almost and starts to smooth out really easily. And as I'm smoothing out, I am smoothing the tops and the edges, but I'm denting in a little bit further on the cat ears so you get a little indentation there. And if you start to feel like you have too much water, like I said, just dry your finger off on a little paper towel and then go back to smoothing everything out. You can use, there's so many clay tools. You can even use a paintbrush to smooth some of this out. But I think that you get a really great texture with using just your finger. And you don't need a lot of supplies to start playing with clay. Okay, so as we're smoothing out, we're going to pull, kind of pulling toward the bottom. And in the same way that we want our little cat ear tips to kind of be leaning up and a little indentation there, we want to create a little rim at the bottom in a way so that it can be a dish and kind of hold anything you place in it. Again, this works great for like jewelry or any little tiny miniature collections you might have. So I'm gonna, again, pull down toward the bottom. And then if you are using a parchment paper or foil, you can always kind of turn your sheet as well. And I'm going to just barely lift up the edges. I'm pulling up the edges of my clay dish with a finger or two, and then kind of pushing back down with my thumb to create a little dish. And clay really stays in the position you're putting it in. If you got your clay too wet, it could start to collapse a little bit, but just dry it off and let it dry a little bit, and then you'll be able to manipulate it better. But if you lift it up a little bit, it's going to pretty much stay in that exact same spot. You can see on my paper here, it's lifted up a little bit along this bottom edge. And we want it to stay in that little lifted position so that we can actually use it as a little trinket dish. And then I'm just gonna, again, dip my finger in a little more water, and I'm just gonna smooth out all my edges. As you push and pull the clay, sometimes it starts to get little teeny cracks, and that's where a little bit of water helps create, again, that sort of clay paste that will just fill in any sort of funky edge. And there we have our little clay dish. So the clay portion goes by really quickly. With air dry clay, the longest portion is actually having to wait for it to dry. But it will be worth it. It becomes really nice and durable. It feels like almost a piece of ceramic when you're finished with it, but you don't have to worry about baking it or do anything like that. If you are using a different type of clay today, maybe you're using a polymer clay, that is the type of clay that you would have to bake in the oven. So that's something you could bake afterward with an adult, and you're going to bake that on a really low temperature. And you can do that with air dry clay as well, but it takes a lot longer to dry and can become really brittle, so it's easy to break. So if you just barely touch it or kind of barely bend it, it can become really easy to kind of snap in half. So the best thing is to just let it dry by itself. And so that is where having it already on parchment paper or foil really comes in handy. So you can just set it aside and let it dry. And then as soon as your little clay cat is dry, you'll be ready to paint. So I made a couple ahead of time so we can still paint together today. So I'm going to set this one that is fresh and still very much wet clay aside. And then I have one that I made yesterday that is ready to be painted. So you can follow along all these steps with me today, and then when you are ready to paint yours tomorrow, then you'll know exactly what to do. And the good thing about the painting portion is that you can make it any style cat you want. So in our little sample here, sort of have a little tricolor cat, a little calico cat with brown and orange and a white little face. But again, you can do yours in any style that you want. So there's no wrong or right way to paint a cat. We're getting into spooky season and Halloween is almost here, believe it or not. So maybe you want to make a little black cat, or maybe you want a purple or a green cat. So to paint ours, I'm going to be using my Creatology acrylic paints. And I have a little extra sheet of paper here. And this is going to be so we can mix some colors together to make custom colors if you want to. And so I have some paintbrushes. And again, I'm going to use my same little jar of water that I used to get my finger wet to manipulate my clay. And I'm going to be able to put my paintbrushes in there in between as well. So to start, I'm going to paint the base of my cat white, but I don't want it to just be pure white. I want it to be a little bit of an off-white, more of a cream. So I'm going to take a little bit of my white paint and I'm going to scoop some out and put it onto my sheet of paper here. And then with a separate brush, I'm going to scoop out a little bit of my brown. So this is like the light brown. In the same little paint kit, I have 2 different shades of brown. So I'm going to use the lighter brown. And I'm just going to use a little bit and drop a little bit right on top of my white paint. And I always like to start with less at first, and you can always add more. It becomes harder to add in to get the color you want if you add too much of your darker color first. So you can see I'm starting to get a little bit of a light, really light brown, almost a little creamy color. And I'm just smushing that paint together, kind of swirling it to make sure it's all nice and mixed. And then we can use that. I'm going to paint the base of my cat. And this isn't going to be a huge difference in the color that it already is, but I do like the way that the paint gives a nice little sheen, a different, almost like a slight shininess to the dish as well. I'm going to take my paintbrush and just paint all around it. And because it is International Cat Day, as we're painting, I have some cat facts for you guys as well. So pull those up as well. And we can, again, if you have any cat facts or cat stories, type them in that Q&A and let me and Nicole hear all about them. But currently there are over 100 different cat breeds, which is a lot of cat breeds. I can only name a few. I don't know about you guys, but I know we've got Calico or Siamese. But there's so many other types of cats that are also all domestic cats. So cats that are pets versus a tiger or a lion. All right, so we've got our first little coat here on our cat. And like I said, it's not a huge difference in our color, but it does give a slight shininess here. And I can kind of show that to the camera. It is starting to dry, but there is already a little bit of that shine. And that makes it feel even more like it's a finished piece of ceramic. And while I have this up, just kind of making sure all of my edges are nice and painted. We're going to come back through and paint on top of this layer now. So this is just our kind of base coat and will be the primary color of the cat's face. And that makes it really easy to do a little cat face on there as well, since any color will show up really nicely against the cream backdrop. Okay, so
Tessa, we did have a friend chime in. Jonathan says, we have a cat named Persimmon, a Siberian.
oh, a Siberian named Persimmon. How cute is that name? And very cool. See, one of the mini cat breeds that you don't hear about a Siberian cat as often as some other ones. That sounds very cool. Okay. I don't know how old Persimmon is, but did you guys know that the oldest cat known lived to be 36 years old, which is very, very old for an animal and very cool. Okay, so I'm getting a couple other colors ready to go here, as you can see. And so I pulled out the dark brown, and then this is the lighter orange, called apricot. And then I have the darker orange, and I'm going to kind of blend some of these together to make perfect shade of orange that I want to use. And again, you can use any colors that you want. So you can do as dark or as light of an orange if you're doing the same color combo that I am, or if you want to do something entirely different, that would be great. Tell us in the Q&A what colors you might be using.
So we have some friends who've chimed in. Marissa is making a tiger and is doing black stripes.
Ooh, fun. I love that idea.
Lindsay has 3 cats, Gracie, Coco, and Ollie.
How cute.
And Gemma says, I have a cat named Sadie who we adopted. We don't know what breed she is, but she's our favorite. She is 2 years old.
Oh, well, good for you guys for adopting that little baby. I'm sure she's living a beautiful life with you. That's so fun. I love hearing about all your guys' cats. I right now do not have any cats, but I grew up with some cats, and my favorite cat I grew up with was named Harley, and he would come when he was called. He lived indoor out and outdoors, and he would come running down the block. You could hear him meowing all the way home, and he also drooled when you pet him. If you pet his head, he would drool, and it was very funny and very cute. Okay, so to add a little bit of color to our cat here now, I am going to start with my brown paint, and I'm using my thinner little pointed brush. You can, again, use any brush you want to. I do think sometimes trying to get nice lines, a pointed brush is really helpful. So I'm going to start at one side, and I'm just dipping directly into my little paint pot since I'm not mixing a color. And I'm just going to slowly drag my paintbrush to make a little line. And cats' colorings and their spots come in all different shapes and sizes, so you can really do whatever you want in this way. Even if you are making a tiger, then you can do stripes all over, or just do a couple stripes along the sides of its face. So then once I have my little line here, I'm going to take my paintbrush and start filling in this whole portion. So I'm giving my cat bigger markings, but you can do as little or as many as you want. You can do stripes or spots. Maybe your cat has polka dots. So when you get to the painting portion, you can see, even though my clay is already dry, it still is really what we call like porous. So it absorbs really easily the paint, so it dries really fast, which is nice. So that first layer of paint is already dry, and we can start adding in our other colors. And then my Trinket dish is going to sit flat. You're never going to see the back of it. So I'm just painting to the edges. But if you want to, you can paint it all the way around. Just wait until the front is dry, and then I'd turn it over. You could paint the other side. Start to see we've got solid little brown patch on our little cat. Okay. Then we can start to add some more little brown patches here as well. And while we're painting, I have some other cat facts for you guys. So the largest cat breed is known as a ragdoll. And I had a friend who had a ragdoll cat, and they are quite large. They can get up to over 20 pounds, and that is not even a fat cat. That is just a big cat. And even though today is National Cat Day, I don't know about you guys, but my favorite element of a cat is when they're a kitten. And did you know that when kittens are first born, they cannot see or hear anything? And they have to slowly learn those skills come to them over the next usually few hours or even a couple of days. And most kittens are also colorblind. Even most cats never have full color. They only have partial color. They see most things without any color, which is so funny that cats come in so many types of colors, but they can't even see it. All right, so we've got a couple different little brown patches going on our little cat here. Again, you can do any sort of color combo that you want, but I'm gonna let that brown start to dry while we mix a couple shades of orange next. And so I'm going to take my apricot, and I want to kind of mix these two oranges together. So I want this bright orange to just be a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to take some of this, I'm going to mix it up a little bit with my paintbrush, and then just pour a teeny bit out. And I'm rinsing off my brush before I dip it into the other orange so I don't mix it up. And then, and sometimes your paint, you want to shake it or mix it before you pour it out. The pigment can kind of separate sometimes, so you want to make sure you get not just the watery part on top. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of my darker orange. And then just like we did with the cream color, I'm just going to kind of mix these together. And so there we have just kind of a nice little mixture of the two oranges. Again, if you want to do it lighter or darker, or if you don't have these different shades, you can always do a little bit of white mixed in with your standard orange. And I'm just going to rinse the extra orange off my paintbrush, and then we can use our orange and paint onto our little cat here.
Tessa, we have another friend chiming in with a cat fact.
Okay.
Cats can jump 5 times their height.
Oh my gosh, that is very high. I wish I could jump 5 times my height, but I'm 5'9", so that would be very high to jump. That's not a skill that I personally have. I also know that cats can also see 120 feet in front of them, which is very far and much further than our little human eyes can see, which is why they are great with nocturnal vision, and they can see animals from a long distance when they hunt. I'm taking my orange paint and I'm just starting to paint directly onto my cat again. And again, I'm using my kind of fine pointed tip paintbrush. I think this helps, especially going up against another color like we are here. And since my edges of the white is dry, I can kind of pick this up even to get a good idea of the edge here. And then just slowly, patiently kind of drag your paintbrush right along the edge of your other color. And this might take a minute to dry. And then for the orange, I think we might actually want to do a second coat. But while I'm holding my cat here, I can kind of see my edges now. And so I'm going to take my brown paintbrush again and go right back into my little brown paint pot and then just clean up these edges. You can come back around at the end as well and do this to make sure that your cat is fully dry. Back down. And then we're gonna do a second little orange spot or patch over here. So again, I'm gonna take my pointed little paintbrush and then just slowly paint directly next to the brown line.
Our friend Jonathan has shared another fun, interesting thing. Jonathan said, "We have a friend, Grayson, who will be watching this playback. He has a beautiful ragdoll named Luna."
Oh, so fun. Ragdolls are the ones we were just talking about that can be some of the biggest cats. So I wonder, do you know how big Luna is? And I'm very glad that Grayson will be joining us in the playback. And as I'm painting on my clay, if you have to do a couple coats, it might be a little smeary at first and you can still see that first coat underneath. Don't layer on your paint too thick the first time. It's okay for it to look a little bit smeared. You just might have to do a couple of coats. And again, it dries pretty fast. So in the time that it took to kind of, fix the edging on my brown paint and then paint a second patch, this orange up in the top is almost dry. So we can just let that wait another moment and get that to start to dry a little bit.
Jonathan said, "Luna is huge."
Well, I hope that Luna loves a little trinket dish. Maybe they'll paint it to look like her. Okay.
We have another fact from a friend. Cats can see 1/16 of the light that humans need to see and do best in dim light. However, they can't see in total darkness. Interesting.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna put away my brown paints. Done with that. Leave our oranges out just in case we might need a little bit more. I think that we've got enough here on our paper. But we can also, while we wait for this orange paint to dry a little bit, I'm going to mix a little bit of pink paint to do our little nose and ears. So I'm going to dry off a paintbrush and then I'm going to use my pink, and this is like the pale pink, but I want it to be even lighter pink than this. You can do, again, yours any color you want. I'm going to take a little bit out. We don't need a lot since we're just doing a little pink nose and little pink ears. So I have a couple little drops of pink there, and then I'm going to take a big glob of white and start mixing those together. So in the same way, we've mixed our other colors, start kind of smearing them together. And as you're doing this, sometimes it's nice to kind of like push on your paintbrush to kind of splay all of your paintbrush out, and that gets all that extra paint out of there. And that way you know that you mixed it. Sometimes when you're mixing paint, all of a sudden you'll be painting a bunch and then a bunch of white paint or a different color that you use to mix kind of comes out of the center of your paintbrush. So that kind of helps you when you twist it, kind of do a little spiral, and that gets all the extra paint off. And that mixed up a nice little lighter shade of pink.
We have another cat fact. Cats can run around 48 kilometers, 30 miles per hour, but only over short distances.
Well, that's so fast. And even for a short distance, that is very impressive. But if you have a pet cat and you've ever tried to catch it, I'm sure you know just how fast they can be. All right, so this orange first coat is dry enough to do another coat on top. And so again, with my little pointed paintbrush here, you can go right back up to your edge of where you painted your original line. And if you go out of your lines, you can always go back once it dries and paint your base color back on top. So that's the other thing that's nice about painting the whole thing one color first. If you leave it just the dry clay, that was really a pretty color. But if you smear your paint or you want to repaint something, now you're going to have to try to match it. So by painting it all one color first, that way you can go back over and paint over anything you might need to, and it will still match the whole face.
We have another interesting fact from our friend Margot. Cats use their whiskers to help them when going into tight spaces. Uh, when their whiskers bend, they know not to go into it. Also, Margot says we have two rescued cats, Sammy and Sylvie.
Oh, cute. I wonder, Margot, are you making your cat look like one of your rescue cats? And yeah, that is so interesting about cat whiskers. And that explains why they can go into much smaller spaces than what looks like they could fit into, but they can test it out before they get stuck. All right. So now we've got all of our little patches going, little spots to make our little cat. Next, we can start to paint our little cat face and do some little pink detailing on their ears. And a little trick that to get nice little round eyes and little round cat nose, we're going to use our paintbrush, but instead of the actual brush, we are going to use the end. So your paintbrush end oftentimes is nice and round. You can also do this with the end of a pin or even an eraser off a pencil. It just might be a little bit bigger, but any sort of rounded paintbrush tip works really well. So I'm going to take my paintbrush tip, and instead of the actual brush portion, I'm going to dip my paintbrush tip end into my black paint, and then I'm going to dot two little eyes. I'm not pressing really hard. If you want bigger eyes, you can press harder or even smear the end of your paintbrush around a little bit, but I'm just going to kind of gently dot two little eyes. And that gives you like perfect little circles. And then I'm just gonna wipe off the tip of my brush with my paper towel. And then we're gonna do the same thing to make a little nose. So I'm going to, and you know, a little cat nose almost looks like a little heart. So we're gonna make three little dots instead of just one. So I'm gonna take my same little paintbrush end. I dipped it in my freshly made custom light pink. And I'm going to do a little dot. And then right next to it, I'm gonna do a second dot touching it. And then one right below it. So you guys can kind of see that. Have 2 eyes and then 3 little dots to make up a little tiny cat nose. And then from there, we're going to take our pink paintbrush, and you can paint a little mouth if you want to.
Margot has shared that we are making one cat that looks just like yours, and the other is going to be a black cat for Halloween.
So cute. I love that you're making a couple of them. All right, so then I just took my paintbrush and again with my finer tip, pointed tip, just drew 2 little lines coming out of the little nose that we made to be a little mouth. And then lastly, we're going to make little pink ears. So I'm just going to take my paintbrush again, and sometimes I like to just kind of twist it on my paper here to get any excess paint off. That way you don't have too much. And then just get a little bit on my tip, and I'm just going to paint little tiny triangles in my ears. It might take a minute or two if you want to do a second coat on your little pink ears. And there you have a finished little cat trinket dish. And so if you are already painting with me today, fantastic. If you're going to wait and paint yours when everything is dry, then I would just wait and let this finish drying as well. And like, again, the paint dries really fast on the clay. So it shouldn't take more than a few minutes, and then you'll be all finished, which is so fun. And then these make great little gifts. They're really cute to share, or use as decoration. Like you said, making a little black cat for Halloween is really fun. And so your little clay dish should hopefully be all finished by tomorrow and dry and ready to use. And we are going to be back and crafting some more next week. We're going to be making these fun collage rainbows, and these are using a ton of different supplies, all on a cardboard box. So we're using some recycled materials, and you can use lots of scraps. Even sometimes like the paper we used as our paint scrap today, you could save that and tear that up into small pieces and use that as well. So I can't wait to be back crafting with you guys next week. And I hope you had a fun International Cat Day with me and had fun crafting. Thanks so much.